Hello there. Welcome to Just the Discs. We talk about Blu-rays here. And today I am talking about some Warner Archive titles and a couple other things. But I've been very excited about what Warner Archive has been up to the past year, and we've got some nice classic titles in this group, but there's also some fun stuff coming from them in the near future. I just wanted to mention they just announced their January slate, and it's pretty cool because it includes things like, Tom and Jerry, the complete CinemaScope collection, which is a compilation of their films in CinemaScope, the shorts that they did for Tom and Jerry in that were for theaters and stuff like that. So it's pretty cool that that's coming out, but that's just one thing. The one that a couple that I'm really excited about is Frankenstein Jr. and the Impossibles, which is a really cool Hanna-Barbera animated series from, I don't know, like the 60s or something. And I remember the DVD release. It's 18 episodes long, and I'm a big fan of this one. I'll definitely be talking about it when I get it. There's another one called Gabriel Over the White House, which I seem to recall as a Joe Dante favorite, all about a presidential candidate played by Walter Houston, who has some kind of divine intervention. He goes from a corrupt politician to a more, public's best interest in mind kind of guy. And I remember digging that and thinking it was interesting. Just Friends with Amy Smart and Ryan Reynolds and some other stuff. So it's a fun release slate for January, and I'm excited about it. But let's get into these other films here. We have, to start with, a movie called The Return of Dr. X. Now, this, I guess, is ostensibly... Do they even mention? In a bizarre but fascinating bit of casting, Humphrey Bogart stars as a vampire in his only horror film role. After a murderous doctor is executed, he is revived with human blood, and soon people with that blood type begin to disappear. When an eager reporter stumbles across a popular actress who is thought to be dead, he can't help but noticing that her skin is unnaturally pale and that she keeps her face concealed beneath a long black veil. Suspecting that evil is afoot, he investigates the terrifying world of a psychotic doctor, that's Bogart, and is drawn into a series of unsolved murders. Now, I was going to say that this was a reference to this earlier Warner Archive release, which is a really great disc, by the way, Dr. X. This is a Michael Curtiz film. He'll come up in a minute. I'm just looking at the back here to double check. I don't know. Lionel Atwill is Dr. Xavier. So it may be sort of an in-title only kind of sequel, but I couldn't help but notice that. It's a movie that Bogart doesn't talk about very much. I guess he wasn't necessarily a huge fan of the film, but it's interesting, and it's interesting to see him in these early roles. It's interesting to see him in villain roles. I know we've gotten sort of used to seeing him in stuff that's more... he's definitely did his own thing in terms of villain roles in the gangster films of the 30s, but this is a little different, and it's got Huntz Hall, it's got Dennis Morgan, it's got some other folks you might recognize in here. Huntz Hall being the big one. If you're a Bowery Boys guy, he pops up in this, and is fairly restrained for Huntz Hall. If you've seen him in some other stuff, he can get kind of big and kind of wild, and he's not that crazy in this. But again, an interesting early Bogart performance, and I'm fascinated by that stuff. As a big fan of his, I just kind of always like to see the stuff he was doing before he really broke out, and what he brings to those roles. And I do think he brings something interesting to this particular performance, But it's a great looking Blu-ray. I mean, that goes without saying. These are all region discs. You can get them at moviezing.com. They have a nice store there. This has an archival audio commentary by director Vincent Sherman and author film historian Dr. Steve Haberman, who's a big Universal horror and general 30s horror kind of guy. And so it's cool to see him or listen to him on a commentary like this, especially when you have the actual director of the film involved, which doesn't happen a lot because a lot of times they've passed away. But obviously that was from a DVD track, so I'm glad they were able to port that over. Classic cartoons, Doggone, Modern, and Porky's Hotel also included here. But so another neat, classic film release from Warner Archive. And we have another one of those right here. This is The Walking Dead. And not to be confused, of course, with the popular AMC television series, but certainly not, in some ways ties into that, I guess. Not exactly. It's about zombies, but in a very different way. So this one stars Boris Karloff from 1936, directed by the great Michael Curtiz, who, did just tons of films that you'd know and be a fan of. Obviously Casablanca, White Christmas, Mildred Pierce, Adventures of Robin Hood, Yankee Doodle Dandy, Captain Blood, Mystery of the Wax Museum, which is another Warner Archive Blu-ray, and then the Dr. X Blu-ray that I just showed you, Seawolf, which is a really cool one. I'm just looking at his stuff there. I'm a big Curtiz fan, as much as he was, I think, apparently a difficult director. He did so much interesting stuff in so many different genres, that I find him endlessly fascinating. So this one is very interesting because it is similar to, it's from 1936, but it's similar to a film that would come out later, in 3 years later, called The Man They Could Not Hang, and that's from 1939. And I'll talk about the similarities. So this one, Karloff stars in this classic horror film as John Ellman, a man who comes back from the dead to seek revenge on the gangsters who framed him for the murder of the judge who first jailed him. After evidence proving Ellman's innocence arrives seconds following his electrocution, officials allow Dr. Evan Beaumont, Edmund Gwenn, to experiment with putting a mechanical heart into Ellman. The device revives the dead man, but he has become a monstrous, white-haired, vengeful zombie. Directed by Oscar winner Michael Curtiz, this thriller is a must-have for fans of the genre. So this is similar to this film, The Man They Could Not Hang, which was part of, a Mill Creek set that came out a few years ago. And that one, Dr. Heinrich Savard is a scientist working on experiments to restore life to the dead. When he's unjustly hanged for murder, he is brought back to life by his trusted assistant. Reanimated, he turns decidedly nasty and sets about murdering the jury that convicted him. So very similar to The Walking Dead. But yeah, Edmund Gwenn, for those that don't remember, I find it interesting he plays this. He is Santa Claus from Miracle on 34th Street. That's how I'll always remember him. So him being sort of the mad scientist type, or at least the assistant to, what does it say about him? Officials allow Dr. Evan Beaumont. No, he is the sort of mad scientist type here. And the heart itself is really interesting because it's like a glass thing, and it's bizarre. But yeah, an intriguing and underseen Karloff horror film. I think partially because it wasn't available. I'm sure it got a DVD at some point, but it's really nice to see it get this wonderful Blu-ray treatment. Features an audio commentary by film historian Greg Mank, a new commentary by film historian and author Alan K. Rode, who's always great. Documentary, Michael Curtiz, The Greatest Director You've Never Heard Of. So that's a super cool inclusion on this disc as well. And it comes with classic cartoons, The Cat Came Back, and Let It Be Me. So that's super cool. to get more Michael Curtiz, more Karloff in a good-looking Blu-ray form. And then we have one more sort of classic of the horror genre, and that's The Beast with Five Fingers. And this one is another that it's definitely got a following. It's a movie that's definitely known, I think mostly because of the Peter Lorre performance. It also has J. Carrol Naish in it, but it's one of those that I think people have heard of and remember because of the Lorre of it. Film icon Peter Lorre turns in yet another memorable performance in this eerie classic set in small-town Italy. Hilary Cummins Lorre, the devoted secretary to wheelchair-bound piano virtuoso Francis Ingram, that's Victor Franson, has a passion for the occult, pouring through every book on the supernatural he can find in Ingram's vast library. Hilary begins to imagine strange and terrifying things, but after Ingram's tragic death, the line between reality and unimaginable terror is blurred as the severed hand from Ingram's corpse begins killing everyone in the villa. Also starring Robert Alda and Andrea King, The Beast with Five Fingers is filled with wit, thrills, and shocking plot twists. It is, like I said, something of a classic, but I feel like one that's not as... This happens with movies that aren't on Blu-ray for a long time. I feel like they're talked about and known among film fans, but they certainly get a nice boost when they get a solid Blu-ray release like this. Also includes a commentary by author and film historian Dr. Steve Haberman again, and filmmaker, film historian Konstantin Nasser is also here. Classic cartoons, The Foxy Duckling and The Gay Aunties. But yeah, I'm a big Peter Lorre fan from way back, and any film that allows him the room to kind of do his thing, if you will, is something that I tend to enjoy. So if you're a classic film fan and or a classic film horror fan, and specifically, I know there's some classic film fans that like everything, and there are some that like just the horror adjacent stuff. And so this is a great horror adjacent title for that type of film fan, and a great release of it from Warner Archive. Okay, shifting gears very dramatically, we have For Your Consideration from 2006. This is a film by the great Mr. Christopher Guest, who, of course, got some notoriety and sort of ended up taking a bit of his model for filmmaking from This Is Spinal Tap. And he has a great collection of actors, a great troupe of actors that would go on to be in his films like Waiting for Guffman, Best in Show, A Mighty Wind. I'm a huge Mighty Wind fan. I like that one a lot. And these actors include people like, Bob Balaban, John Michael Higgins, Eugene Levy, Jane Lynch, Michael McKean, Catherine O'Hara, Parker Posey, Harry Shearer, Fred Willard, Larry Miller, Ed Begley Jr., Jennifer Coolidge, Paul Dooley, Don Lake. I'm actually looking at the cast from Mighty Wind, but this applies to For Your Consideration as well. Yeah, this one's very... It's, for me, a slightly lesser effort from the Guest troupe, but they're so funny and they're so good together that it always ends up being an enjoyable watch. So I hadn't seen this one in a little bit, but director Christopher Guest reunites with his star-packed team from Mighty Wind, Best in Show, Waiting for Guffman, for this hilarious keen-edge comedy set in the town where Oscar is the backbone of an industry not known for having a backbone. In For Your Consideration, buzz of potential Oscar nominations sends the cast and crew of the low-budget indie film Home for Purim into a wide-eyed frenzy. Catherine O'Hara, Harry Shearer, and Parker Posey play Purim's lead actors who ride the wave of the buzz with odd and oddly touching results. Eugene Levy, Jennifer Coolidge, John Michael Higgins, Jane Lynch, Michael McKean, Bob Balaban, and Fred Willard round out the cast of Hollywood types more than happy to exploit and bask in the leverage the Oscar hype. So I'm trying to remember here. Okay, so Fred Willard and Jane Lynch play hosts of like an Entertainment Tonight type talk show. Fred Willard is his usual obnoxious but funny self. Bob Balaban and Michael McKean play the writers of the movie. Christopher Guest plays the director, and I mentioned the cast. John Michael Higgins is a publicity guy. Let's see here. Yeah, I think that's. Oh, Ricky Gervais is one of the producers doing his usual thing. But yeah, it is funny to see a sort of send up of Hollywood. It's an easy target, sort of low hanging fruit for this crew, but they are always funny and always doing interesting and throwing in odd jokes that are a little unexpected. And so it's an enjoyable watch from that point of view, especially if you enjoy the Christopher Guest canon. This has a commentary with Christopher Guest and Eugene Levy, and over 30 minutes of hilarious bonus material, some deleted scene stuff, etc. Yeah, definitely worth a look for the Christopher Guest collector, and nice to see this one finally get a Blu-ray. I think that, outside of Mascots, which is a Netflix movie, this makes all of his stuff now finally on Blu-ray in terms of this group and this the cast, the troupe, if you will, the stock company was what I was trying to think of. So that is for your consideration. Next, we have something from Film Masters. This is a very different one from the rest. It's Salt of the Earth from 1954, and a very interesting, very important film. Also a cult film, which I discovered through the Danny Perry Cult Movies 2, I think it was first mentioned in. It says, at last, an honest movie about working American people. Salt of the Earth centers on a long, difficult worker strike against a mining company in New Mexico. Ramon Quintero, Juan Chacon, fights for equity of wages as well as health and safety issues. But at home, he mistreats his wife, Esperanza. When the men are forced to end their picketing, Esperanza joins the other women who demand to play a role in the strike against their husbands' wishes. Written, directed, and produced by members of the original blacklisted Hollywood 10, Salt of the Earth is a powerful, persuasive drama that educates and inspires. So this is a really interesting movie because it was really hot button in 1954, and in Juan Chacon, I believe, is actually, he plays sort of the lead, and he was one of the actual guys that was involved in this mining strike, and so a lot of the movie is sort of based on what he was going through, and that's unusual. And his wife is played by a up-and-coming Mexican actor, Rosaura Revueltas, and she's very, very good. She's on the cover there, and but it also has Will Geer and a few other folks that you might recognize. But definitely a movie that was really sat on and fought against, and it, didn't get much, if any, of a release in the United States, and sort of became a cult item after the fact because of its position on unions and collective bargaining, etc. But really neat to see this our archive edition with slipcover, etc. Come from Film Masters, who do a really nice job with their releases. It has a commentary from C. Courtney Joyner, Mark Lagan, and Pfeff Sutton, and then liner notes by Susan King. So you actually get a little booklet with this, which obviously the Warner Archive discs don't do that. So I'm going to read from the booklet and just from Danny Perry's entry in his Cult Movies book. Salt of the Earth had its world premiere in New York City on March 14, 1954, but not a big movie palace like the Paramount or the Ziegfeld theaters. The only theater that agreed to show the film was the 86th Street Grand Theater. Salt of the Earth was a political hot potato, not only because of its subject matter, it tells the story of striking miners, but also because the director, writer, producer, associate producer, composer, and performer were blacklisted. In fact, Salt of the Earth was the only American film that was blacklisted during the 1950s. So that is fascinating historical stuff and shows you how scared Hollywood was of this movie, let alone, and that has to do with HUAC and all the other red baiting stuff that was going on at the time. Salt of the Earth was the first and only film made by Independent Productions Corps, which was formed in 1951 by associate producer Simon Lazarus, director Herbert J. Bieberman, member of the Hollywood 10, and producer Paul Jericho, to employ blacklisted filmmakers and performers. Noted screenwriter Michael Wilson, who had won the Oscar with Harry Brown in 1951's A Place in the Sun before he was blacklisted, based the drama on the 1951-52 strike in New Mexico by the International Union of Mine, Mill, and Smelter Workers against Empire Zinc, a subsidiary of New Jersey Zinc. Most of the miners were Latinos, and the film holds no punches in showing how poorly the workers and their families were treated. Salt of the Earth also has a strong feminist message, and I am a woman, hear me roar moment as the wives of the miners disobey their husbands by getting out of the kitchen and taking off their aprons to picket and protest. So again, very important and neat to see it get this 70th anniversary edition. It looks good, restored in HD. I don't have any information about the elements as far as I can tell, but it's a black and white all-region disc. And again, important film from Film Masters, which is cool. From Danny Perry's Guide for the Film... Cult Movies 2. And I knew this one too because of John Sayles. And Danny Perry makes reference to that here. In John Sayles' The Return of the Sea Caucus 7, 1981, a perceptive comedy about a group of student radicals of the late 60s and early 70s who reunite a decade later, which is basically his version of The Big Chill before The Big Chill. His first movie, if you haven't seen it. Characters remember Salt of the Earth as a rallying point for the political movement and the imprisoned women's The Formula, a chant as a mock battle cry for political resistance. Indeed, Salt of the Earth, though intended for working class people of all eras, was the one non-documentary with which student activists of the protest years could identify. It so clearly reflected their political concerns that catching a 60mm print of it at some campus fundraiser for the first time, they were startled that such a film existed, especially considering that it was made during the McCarthy era. They saw triumphant militant protests against a seemingly invincible authoritarian foe, characters like themselves whose political consciousness is raised as they engage in political activity, and a film that speaks out for solidarity against the power elite, encompassing the racial brotherhood and sexual equality. Today, Salt of the Earth has lost none of its impact. Norma Ray, 1979, with similar themes, may be a commendable, provocative, progressive film, highly controversial by Hollywood standards, but by comparison to Salt of the Earth, it is timid and gimmicky. The emphasis is on performance rather than themes. Its celebration of an individual rather than a people. It is targeted for a liberal middle class audience. The striking people in Salt of the Earth advocate reform, as did their real life counterparts, rather than a revolutionary takeover of the mine, a bone of contention for some radicals, but for most moviegoers with political orientation, no American narrative film is more inspiring and emotionally satisfying than this remarkable 1954 film. So Danny was a big fan of it. Just a movie that I feel like speaks to right now, even as it's 70 years old. And the commentary is very good. They're definitely going in depth. They have a lot of detail about the production and those involved, and I was very much enjoying that track as well. So another nice release from Film Masters. And then lastly, we have Fraggle Rock Back to the Rock Season 1. Now, this is a new show from... Is it from last year? It's not the original Fraggle Rock. This is a new incarnation Welcome to the world of Jim Henson's Fraggle Rock, Back to the Rock. Just through a hole in the wall of Doc's workshop, you will find the magical underground home of the hilarious, musical, fun-loving Fraggles, industrious little doozers, and giant lumbering gorgs, not to mention an endless array of wondrous creatures that live in the tunnels and caves of Fraggle Rock, packed with fraggly comedy, exhilarating adventures, memorable songs, and celebrity guest stars like David Diggs, Ed Helms, Cynthia Erivo, Patti LaBelle, Kenan Thompson, and Foo Fighters. Fraggle Rock Back to the Rock explores the magic that happens when we celebrate and care for our interconnected world. Starring a cast of puppet characters brought to life by the world-renowned Jim Henson's Creature Shop, the award-winning and critically acclaimed series from the Jim Henson Company will have the entire family dancing their cares away again. And this includes 3 episode commentaries from puppeteers John Tartaglia and Karen Prell, as well as a blooper reel and sing-alongs. It is a 3-disc set, which includes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, like 14 episodes, I guess. The entire season one run. Always nice to see this kind of thing get a Blu-ray release. Muppet fans abound in the world, and I'm certainly one of them. And so this is a show I want to share with my daughter when I can. But was a big fan of Fraggle Rock back in the day, which originated, I think, on HBO, and was a really interesting new, Muppet take and new Muppet characters, and just a beloved show ultimately. So it's nice to see it get this new reincarnation for a new generation, if you will, and a nice Blu-ray release of that first season of the show. So that'll do it for this round here. Again, these are available at MovieZing. That's ZYNG. And you can get any of them there. Pre-orders are available too. But there's tons of stuff on the site, not just Warner Archive and Sony releases, and Film Masters, but some other stuff as well. So definitely worth poking around on the site to discover some stuff. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen, and I will talk to you all very soon. Bye-bye.